Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama
Supri Prakacharya Ashto Tirtatashi Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Jayādvaita Gadadhar Srivas Radhi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai, Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Gunadhar Kri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Navadip Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Jamuna Mai Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari Bol.
Hari Hari Bol. Thank you so much, Maharaj, and thank you everyone for joining us for Srimad Bhagavatam class with His Holiness Jayādvaita Swami. It is Wednesday, September 21st, 2022, and we are reading in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 8th chapter, Manifestation of Brahma from Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. Maitreya Muni is answering Vidura's questions, and we're so happy you could join us from Vrindavan Dham. Maharaj, thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Kendra Prabhu, and thank you all for being here. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Chaturyuganam cha sahasramapsu sapansvayo dhiriteya sashaktya kalakyaya sarita karma tantro lokan pitan dharvishe swadehe. The Lord lay down for 4,000 yuga cycles in his internal potency, and by his external energy, he appeared to be sleeping within the water. When the living entities were coming out for further development of their fruitive activities, actuated by the energy called Kala Shakti, he saw his transcendental body as bluish. Purport. In the Vishnu Purana, Kala Shakti is mentioned as avidya. The symptom of the influence of the Kala Shakti is that one has to work in the material world for fruitive results. The fruitive workers are described in Bhagavad Gita as mutas, or foolish. Such foolish living entities are very enthusiastic to work for some temporary benefit within perpetual bondage. One thinks himself very clever throughout his life if he's able to leave behind him a great asset of wealth for his children. And to achieve this temporary benefit, he takes the risk of all sinful activities, without knowledge that such activities will keep him perpetually bound by the shackles of material bondage. Due to this polluted mentality and due to material sins, appear to be bluish. Such an impetus of activity for fruitive result is made possible by the dictation of the external energy of the Lord, Kala. Om Ajnana Timidantasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale, Vayam Rupakada Mahyam, Tathati Shapadantikam, Vande Hang Shri Guru, Shri Jutapadakamalam, Shri Guru Vaishnavanscha, Shri Rupam Shadrajatam, Shahagana Laganatam Vitam Stam Sajivam, Sadvaitam Savadvitam, Pradijana Sahitam, Krishna Paitam Nadevam, Sri Radha Krishna Padam, Shahagana Valita, Sri Vishakam Vitanscha. Are we better without this slide? Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho. Yeah, maybe. Dina Bandho Jagatpate, Gopesha Gopika Kanta, Radha Kanta Namostute, Tapta Kamshana Gaurangi, Radhe Vrindavaneshwari, Vrishabhanu Sute Devi, Pranamami Modi Priye, Mancha Gopatarupyascha, Kripa Sindho Pyevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Shri Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram Rama Rama Hare Hare. Chaturyuganam Sahasramatsu Swapan Swayo Dhiritaya Shaktya Kalakya Asadita Karma Tantro Lokana Pitan Darishe Svadehe. The Lord Garbhodakshay Vishnu is sleeping on the waters, and for 4,000 yuga cycles, he is absorbed in his thinking of his internal potency. I would assume that's 4,000 yuga cycles. Yeah. I can't work out the math. I get lost in it all. But it's not that immediately the living entities appear. For 4,000 yuga cycles, the Lord is absorbed in his internal potency, and his external potency appears to be asleep. But now the external potency is starting to stir. Kala Shakti is Prabhupada identifies as avidya, ignorance. Avidya karma sangyanya shatiya shakti shita. In ignorance, one thinks that one has to work hard for enjoyment, and one forgets the real purpose of life. Instead, one becomes bound by the results of his activities for enjoyment. He tries to enjoy, and instead he becomes more and more entangled and doesn't realize what he's doing. Vidya, karma sangha. The living entities are under the sway of Kala Shakti, the influence of time, the influence of ignorance, and they're reappearing or about to reappear for further development of their fruitive activities. That means that in the previous, until the previous dissolution, they were intent on material enjoyment, And still that spirit is there within them. Their subtle bodies still exist because of their attachment to false ego and the project for material happiness. So their desires and their materialistic mindset has not been given up, nor has it been taken away from them. This question was raised in the previous session. The subtle body persists from one lifetime to the next, and even from one creation to the next. Someplace I recall, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur said that the mind is transformable. I think I heard that quoted by someone. Anyway, the idea is that the bodies we move through in succession. We give up one body and take up another, Chatvadeham Punarjanma. But that's the gross body, but the subtle body stays with us. And with that subtle body, again, or from that subtle body, as a result of having that subtle body, we take on another gross body, which to try to enjoy enthusiastically for some temporary benefit, not realizing how entangled we're becoming. For this, one performs sinful activities, and the aggregate combination of the living entities on account of their sinful activities appeared bluish. So his transcendental body is taking on a bluish hue from the aggregate sinful activities of the conditioned souls. There's a question I have. In text 11, it's described that the description here concerns the partial devastation. At the end of the purport, Srila Prabhupada had said that the material energy was not completely wound up, as in the case of the full dissolution of the material world. And yet, we're about to hear about the birth of Brahma, which takes place after a full dissolution. So I don't have any information on that, the solution to that. If someone does, I'm all ears. Now, there's a question from Athena. Can you please clarify the relationship between he saw his transcendental body as bluish, the Lord being bluish, and how the living entities are bluish due to polluted mentality and material sins? Due to this polluted mentality and due to material sins, the aggregate combination of living entities appeared to be bluish. I don't know why blue particularly, rather than say gray or some other hue. But the idea is that their sinful reactions come out as a color or appear as a color. Just as sometimes if there's if you get a bruise, it appears blue. If you get a fever, your skin may appear red. If you're poisoned, then again, perhaps blue. So the polluted or diseased circumstance shows up as a color. So that seems to be what's going on here. The living entities have a background of sinful activities. For enjoyment, they've crossed the line and they're trying to enjoy this way or that way. And so this pollution of sinful karma is there, and it shows up in this color. Yes, Athena, your hand's still up.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandavat Pranams. I guess my question is, the way I, in one sense, read this, so as the verse is saying, the Lord lied down, and then he saw that his transcendental body was blue. And here I may be incorrect in tying that. For example, we know that Krishna is really black. I could be black, but when he comes down kind of through Mahavishnu into this kind of material world, he's bluish, kind of like blackish bluish. I know like monsoonist, but really kind of the color blue. So I'm tying this verse to that, that his body was blue. But later in the purport saying that due to kind of material sins, the aggregate of these living entities are blue. And so the way I'm interpreting it is that the living entities like make up like Krishna's body, or like it's a part of him, and that's why he is the color blue when he comes down and through kind of Mahavishnu. But are these completely mutually exclusive events and nothing related?
Yeah, it's not related. Krishna's described in the spiritual world, Goloka, as being Shayamam Tribanga Lalitam Shama. So this bluish, blackish Shama color of Krishna is eternal and has nothing to do with the business of the conditioned souls of this material world. Even in the spiritual world, Krishna's body is bluish, and that blue is not a reflection of sinful activities. It's a product of his internal energy, or his own situation. His spiritual body is constitutionally bluish. It's a manifestation of his eternal, blissful, fully knowledgeable self. It has nothing to do with contamination by the material energy. Even before the material energy is manifest, the Lord is existing with his color. So this blue just appears to be a different blue. You know, there's we hear that the Lord's body is bluish, but here again he's seeing his body as bluish. And let's see if there's a word there about it. Just give me a moment. Apitan. I don't know. Let's see if we find anything about Apitan. I hadn't looked it up because I hadn't thought about your question. But let's see if we find something.
Where do we also see that we are blue? When the purport says that that the combination of living entities appear to be bluish, none of us are blue, or in what context then do we appear to be blue?
Yeah, we're certainly not blue by in color. We don't look blue, and the dictionary is not helping me at all. Nothing about bluish in regard to a pita, so I don't know what's happening there. But the let's see. Yeah, so it appears to be a manifestation of something particular regarding our material consciousness. It's a pathological symptom, if you will. It's a pathological symptom. The bluishness is not necessarily manifest as blue skin for the conditioned souls, but there's a reserved pathological situation, and that manifests here as a blue tint of some sort, not identical with the Lord's eternal blueness, but another kind of blueness. It's interesting, Saraswati says that Lord Shiva's neck turns blue also when he drank the poison that emerged from churning the ocean. Yeah, so that's a kind of poisonous blue. And there are other poisons where one turns blue due to poisoning. So again, it appears to be for the living entities, not literal skin tone blueness, because we don't see one another as blue men and women. And for the Lord, it's a different blue from his transcendental, eternal color. Okay. Anything else? Tasyarta sukshma binivishta drishter antargatorto rajasataniyan punena kalanugatena vidha shushyam tada vidyata nabhideshat. The subtle subject matter of creation on which the Lord's attention was fixed, was agitated by the material mode of passion, and thus the subtle form of creation pierced through his abdomen. I think Srila Prabhupada doesn't have a purport here, but there's a purport by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. This verse elaborates. After his glance entered into the subtle bodies of all the jivas, artha sukshma, to pull them out, the material elements within him, antargata, artha, with very subtle form, taniyan, became agitated by rajas according to time, and were brought forth, pushed upwards from his navel. And Haridas quotes, similarly, these three qualities, these three colors, yellow is sattvagun, blue is tamagun, and red is rajagun. These colors, they are representation of these three modes of material nature. Redness means passion, blue, black, that means ignorance, and yellow, goodness. Thank you, Haridas Prabhu, very pertinent. The ignorance is represented as blueness. So Kalakya, the Kala Shakti is identified with avidya, ignorance, and ignorance is represented as blueness. Thank you. Anything else here? Sapadmakosha sahasoditishtat kalena karma pratibodhanena sarojishatat shalilam vishalam idyotayan arka ivatmayonihi. piercing through this sum total form of the fruitive activity of the living entities, took the shape of the bud of a lotus flower, generated from the personality of Vishnu. And by his supreme will, it illuminated everything like the sun and dried up the vast waters of devastation. Again, there's a commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti. Material elements transforming into a lotus bud by time stood above the waters of devastation by the force of the awakened karmas of the jivas. The lotus bud had Vishnu, Atma, as its source. It was like the sun, illuminating by its effulgence. It did not depend on the sun to light up the water. There's also a comment here by sort of some summary comment by Rishan Prabhu. Garbhodakshay Vishnu appeared as if asleep, resting alone on the Nanta Shesh in the waters that had previously devastated the universe. At that time, both the material energy and the living entities, wrapped in their subtle bodies, were wound up within him. And skipping, Maitreya Muni explains that after 1,000 yuga cycles of lying inside Garbhodakshay Vishnu's bodies, the living entities, under the influence of time, prepare to emerge and again begin fruitively motivated action. While the Lord was lying down, a subtle form containing all the living entities' karma suddenly pierced his abdomen. By his supreme will, that energy took on the shape of a lotus stem and gradually grew into a bud. The lotus, which was the Virat Rupa, the Lord's gigantic, subtle, universal form, had been amalgamated in the Lord at the time of the previous universal destruction. As it grew, it illuminated everything and dried up the vast waters of devastation. The Lord then expanded himself as Kshirodakshay Vishnu, the supersoul of all living entities, and entered into that lotus. It was on that lotus that Lord Brahma took birth. Shall we move ahead? Taloka Padmang Sau Eva Vishnu Prabhivishat Sarva Gunav Apasam Tasmin Swayam Vedamayo Vitata Swayam Vibhuvam Yasmabhadan Swayam Bhuvam Yam Smavadanti Soput. Into that universal lotus flower, Lord Vishnu personally entered as the supersoul. And when it was thus impregnated with all the modes of material nature, the personality of Vedic wisdom, whom we call the self-born, was generated. Purport. This lotus flower is the universal Virat form, or the gigantic form of the Lord in the material world. it becomes amalgamated in the personality of Godhead Vishnu in his abdomen at the time of dissolution. And it becomes manifest at the time of creation. This is due to Garbhodakshai Vishnu, who enters into each of the universes. And this form is the sum total of all the fruitive activities of the living entities conditioned by material nature. And the first of them, namely Brahma, or the controller of the universe, is generated from this lotus flower. This firstborn living being, unlike all the others, has no material father, and thus he is called self-born or Swayambhu. He goes to sleep with Narayan at the time of devastation. And when there's another creation, he's born in this way. From this description, we have the conception of three: the gross Virat form, the subtle Hiranyagarbha, and the material creative force, Brahma. Tat Loka Padmam, that lotus, Satu Eva, Vishnu. Sabu Eva Vishnu, the Lord Pravivashat, entered into it. And the comment is there that it expresses astonishment. It's something astonishing. Guna avapasam tasmin swayam vedamaya, the personality of Vedic wisdom, Brahma, Vitata. Vitata means the controller of the universe. And Swayambhu, Prabhupada has discussed as Swayambhu, self-born. So Brahma appears at this point. Now, Murari Gupta's Prabhu says, it sounds a bit as though the fruitive activities, even in a subtle form, are so intense that when combined, they illuminate and dry the universe. Yeah, let's look at that. They that's in the previous verse, yes. So Padma Koshas Asodi Tishtat Kalina Karma Pratibodhanina Swarochi Shah, by its whole effulgence, Tat Shalilam Vishalam, the vast waters of the universe, Vidyotayan Artai, they illuminated everything like the sun. Let's see if there's something. Well, it's not clear to me that that's exactly what happened. Let me just look here for a moment. It doesn't specifically say that that's what was, that the fruitive activities of the jiva were the illuminating force. It says that the lotus flower or the lotus bud had that potency. But Prabhupada, it just says in the verse, it appeared from Vishnu, and it was self-illuminating. And Prabhupada in his commentary says that it had Vishnu as its source. Well, that's Vishnu, Vishwanath. Prabhupada says in the translation, by his supreme will, it illuminated everything like the sun. By his supreme will. So Prabhupada ascribes it to the will of Vishnu rather than to the nature of the conditioned souls. By the force of the karma of the living entities, it stood above the waters of devastation, Vishwanath says. And then he says it had Vishnu as its source, and it was like the sun. So was it like the sun because it represented the powerful force of the avidya of the living entities, or rather because it had Vishnu as its source? Srila Prabhupada seems to indicate the latter. Saraswati says, I was thinking of the book by Dickens, A Christmas Carol, okay, where Scrooge is given a chance for redemption and does redeem himself after the ghosts of past, present, and future visit him to show him firsthand what his life would be like if he continued in the current track. The fact that we have knowledge and help from Krishna and Guru, and still this force of avidya is so powerful that we cannot redeem ourselves once and for all. The living entities hear about the glories of the Lord and they say, bah, humbug, because of a sinful mentality and a miserly mentality. So we require the mercy of Krishna. Otherwise, in ignorance, we go on thinking that we're very intelligent, we're saving money, we're rational, we're intelligent, we're, as Prabhupada says, clever. And this is all Maya. All right. Athena? Athena, do you have a question?
Yes, I apologize. My sensitivity on my phone I'm having some difficulty with that, so some delay. Thank you so much, Marge. Can we go back to 8:15? And I have a lot of questions on this verse.
Which verse do you want to go back to?
Oh, 3:8:15. Text 15.
15. Yeah.
Okay. So
okay.
The translation, it says, into that universal lotus flower, Lord Vishnu personally entered as the super soul. But this seems to be a disconnect here versus the purport, where the purport is much more in line with.
Go a little slow because Athena, if you go a little, your broadcasting is imperfect and it's breaks up a little. So if you go slower, that will help.
No problem. Thank you so much. So first, in the translation, it says, into that universal lotus flower, Lord Vishnu personally entered as the super soul. This makes me think that, so taking a few steps back, my understanding was you have Mahavishnu, and from his pores, these many bubbles of material universes come out of his pores, which seems to now say that they're universal lotus flowers, because the Lord personally enters into that universal lotus flower as Garbhadaksha Vishnu. That's one.
No. Hold on right there. The picture is not right. So far, you're good that the universes come out like bubbles from the pores of Mahavishnu. Then within each bubble, Garbhodakshay Vishnu enters, and from his abdomen, Navidesha, from the area of the navel, comes the lotus flower, and then the Lord enters that lotus flower as the super soul. Now that's Kshirodakshay Vishnu.
Okay, so perfect. Okay, so that clarifies it, that this verse, in sense, when they mention a super soul, is Kshirodakshay, because in one sense you can say Garbhodakshay is the super soul of the universe. And previous...
No. Generally, when we hear about the super soul of the universe, we're hearing about Kshirodakshay Vishnu.
Okay, thank you. I guess just on that note, I remember, I think it was, I don't know if it was actually in a canto or if it was from Prabhupada's lecture, but the presence of the Lord, there's growth when there's the presence of the Lord. So the universe is ever expanding and growing because the presence of the Lord. And I think that was where I had heard that the presence of the Lord in the universe is the super soul as Garbhodaksha Vishnu of that universe. But understood that typically, I guess, when they mention super soul, they mean Kshirodakshay Vishnu. Thank you.
Yes, Kshirodakshay Vishnu.
Thank you. So I guess with that, what you had described as the normal picture of what has been typically, I guess, preached or my understanding. But here it sounds like this universal Virat form is the lotus flower, meaning the entire material universe is the lotus flower.
Yeah, this gets quite subtle, and that last line is something interesting. As a preface to this, it will come. We'll find in later verses and elsewhere in Bhagavatam that the matter of creation is so complicated that we're really never going to understand it fully. We're just getting some summary description, but to really understand the nuts and bolts of creation is beyond our tiny brains. Brahma manages it all, but we're far below his station. Yes, the lotus flower appears to be identified as Virat. You've got basically an empty shell here with Garbhodakshay Vishnu lying in the waters. All that's there is water. There's no universe yet. There's only the Lord lying down on these waters, on the Anantashesh. And then this lotus flower in bud form is coming from the Lord's abdomen. And yes, that bud is identified with the Virat Rupa, or the universal form. The universal form is the form of the whole universe. Virat Rupa, the whole universe appears as this universal form. And this Padma Kosha, this bud, represents the universe, or is the universe in bud form. Just as a flower is on a tree, first you see the bud, then you see the flower. So the bud, it is the flower, but in preliminary form. So the Lord is present in the universal form within that bud, or as that bud, but it hasn't yet flowered. It's still in bud form, but it is the universal form, and it will appear more elaborately as the universe unfolds.
Thank you. It's just interesting that when we see pictures of Garbhodaksha Vishnu, and from his abdomen, this lotus flower coming out, and Lord Brahma sitting on it. But relatively, Lord Brahma is bigger than the lotus flower. So it's this concept that he's just sitting on the lotus flower, but actually based on this purport and what you just described, the entire universe is a lotus flower. And if we were to actually draw it, little Brahma is just like a little speck within the lotus flower. It's not that he's actually sitting on it and dominating the lotus flower like a seat. It's actually, he's actually existing within that lotus flower, which is the Virat Roop.
This is the sort of questions that the artists would, as Prabhupada said, tease him with, how big is Brahma in relation to this, and who has the beard and who doesn't, and so on. But no, we hear in the description of Bhagavatam that Brahma is sitting on the lotus flower. It appears, although the lotus flower, what should we say, although this bud includes everything, it appears as a lotus flower, where Brahma sits on the lotus flower, and as we'll find in coming verses, he starts to wonder, what am I doing here? Who am I sitting on this lotus flower? What am I supposed to do? Where's this lotus coming from? All these questions come to him. But he's literally sitting on the lotus. Elsewhere, it's described that there's a sort of wind in the universe, and so the lotus is swaying. And Lord Brahma is sitting on this swaying lotus, thinking, "What am I doing here? What am I supposed to? Where have I come from, and what am I supposed to do?" So the proportions here, the relative proportions, are of course difficult to grasp, and especially for us. Brahma himself had so many questions, and here we are trying to figure out the proportions of Lord Brahma and the lotus flower. You could extend that and say, well, in relationship to the whole universe, how big was the flower? But we see in the approved paintings that Lord Brahma is sitting on a flower, and the Bhagavatam describes Lord Brahma that way. It doesn't appear that he's just a tiny speck on a well-elaborated universe. The universe hasn't really gotten going yet, but there's just the lotus and Brahma seated on the lotus.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay.
In the purport, and this is just to, I guess, clarify my understanding. It says, in this form is the sum total of all the fruitive activities of the living entities conditioned by material nature. And the first of them, namely Brahma, or the control of the universe, is generated from this lotus flower. So a couple of things here. It is then alluding to the fact that Lord Brahma is conditioned by material nature. And I know not every Lord Brahma is a pure devotee. I know in our universe, Lord Brahma is, but here it's alluding that I guess most Lord Brahmas are conditioned by material nature. And I would say here, then it supports the, once Lord Brahma comes down, Lord Brahma, once having contact with material nature, then further degrades. But then there's also, I think within Bhagavatam, where it's saying to reach the plan of Lord Brahma, in essence, at the time of annihilation, Lord Brahma will go back home to Godhead and take with him all the devotees that, in Brahmaloka that have perfected their lives. So they go back. And then, so I don't know if you can clarify that, but later also in the purport, it says, basically Lord Brahma, having no material father, he goes to sleep with Narayan at the time of devastation. Not really sure what that means. It seems like he doesn't get absorbed back into Mahavinu's body. And when there's another creation, he is born this way again. So here we have the saying that Lord Brahma goes back to Godhead and brings all the devotees that have become pure with him. And then here it's saying Lord Brahma falls asleep, not even goes back into Mahavishnu's body at the time of destruction. And then it just seems to be like some dissonance here. If you can further.
It appears it seems that there are different Brahmas referred to. Some go back to Godhead, and then you got Vanani Vartante. If you go back to Godhead, you don't come back. But then some, here it says that he goes to sleep with Narayan. So then it seems that he also continues to exist in the material world. It's a little, again, it's complex. And that, as you say, there are apparent contradictions here. But I don't know that I have more insight into it at this point. Yeah.
Thank you. And then can you actually, you had touched upon this last sentence, which I found confusing. I'm not really sure what it means. From this description, we have the conception of three. What three? And it says the gross Virat form, the universal form, the subtle Hiranyagarbha, I'm guessing that's Garbhavakshai Vishnu, and the material creative force Brahma. But what is this conception of three? We usually don't have that. I mean, unless you kind of, the only time really with the three is applying the Holy Trinity in Christianity to, I guess.
We have threes all over the place. We have three modes of nature. We have internal energy, external energy, and marginal energy. We've got goodness, passion, and ignorance. The Lord is described, one of his names is Tradisha, the Lord of the threes. There's so many threes, we don't know what to do with them all. So it's certainly not just a Holy Trinity, and after that you're done with threes. There are threes all over the place. But coming to the three mentioned here, and two out of the three seem clear. Brahma, we understand him. He's the creator of the material world in terms of the engineering. He's the contractor. The Virat Rupa, we've touched upon that. We have a reasonably clear picture of what that is, the universal form of or the form of the universe, not yet elaborated. And then the subtle Hiranyagarbha. So the subtle Hiranyagarbha is the more perplexing term. Hiranyagarbha, Hiranya means golden, and Garbha means like a fetus. So the embryonic golden form, and that has different references. Sometimes Hiranyagarbha refers to Lord Vishnu, sometimes Hiranyagarbha refers to Lord Brahma. Sometimes there are other meanings of Hiranyagarbha, and Srila Prabhupada just doesn't elaborate here on what Hiranyagarbha means in this context. So I think we'll have to be puzzled about that. There's a couple more questions and comments here. We are running out of time. From Chaitanya Bhagavad, Prabhin posts, since all the sinful reactions of Jagai and Madhai took shelter in the body of Mahaprabhu, his body turned black. And then Advaita Prabhu said, Gaurasundar is looking exactly like Sri Gokula Chandra. And the Lord said, see how these two sinners are black. Perform kirtan so that their sins take shelter in those who blaspheme the devotees. Okay, thank you for that. Then, how does the creation from Saraswati described here reconcile with the description in the Bible? Oh, that's a whole topic. We're not going to get into that today. How we try to correlate the Bhagavatam with the Bible as a whole. Different discussion. Aren't Brahma, Indra, etc. titles that different jivas assume at different times of creation? Yes, that's so. So if Brahma goes to sleep in a particular creation, we don't know in what form he went to sleep, who he was, that is to say, in the previous creation. I don't have more about that. Surabhi Kunaj, I always understood that Lord Brahma gets absorbed back into Garbhodakshaya Vishnu during the partial devastations, but then goes back to Godhead in the total devastation. Yeah, that's the general description. And Praveen says, different classes of devastation. There are many devastations during Brahma's day, and another during Brahma's sleep, and another when he dies. Yeah. So again, we would elaborate at this point. We'll stop there with perhaps some threads not tied together. If you still have questions you'd like to carry over to the next class, please feel free. Tomorrow will be Chaitanya Charitamrita, but then the next day I can continue this discussion. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna, glory to Srila Prabhupada. Let's have some kirtan.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Gurudev Jaya Gurudev, Jai Jai Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Premanande Hari Hari Bol.
Jai Om Srimad Holiness Prabhupada Vicacharya Go to Srimad AC Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Sakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kunti Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Ki Jai, Gangamai Ki Jai, Gangamai Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande Hari Bol.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Shara. And someone else was there. Thank you to all. Thank you. Thank you to Haridas people. And again, thank you to all the devotees.
Hare Krishna. Thank you everyone so much for being here, for your comments and questions and participation, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow for Chaitanya Charitamrita if you can make it. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayādvaita Maharaj Ki Jai.
Jai.
Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande
Hari Bol.
Shri Gurudev.